Universal Studios, August 1964. Stage 9. The temperature inside the soundstage has reached 90 degrees, but it's not the California heat that's making everyone sweat. Audie Murphy stands in the center of a mock Western town, his hand resting on a very real Colt .45, while director George Sherman backs away with his hands raised, and 47 crew members hold their breath. This isn't a scene from Murphy's latest B-Western. This is a moment of pure, uncontrolled rage from America's most decorated war hero, a man who killed 240 enemy soldiers and is now seconds away from ending his Hollywood career with one terrible decision. The soundstage feels smaller than usual, the walls pressing in despite its cavernous size. The elaborate Western set, complete with a saloon, general store, and sheriff's office, has become a battlefield. Prop guns rest in holsters around the set, but Murphy's weapon is no prop. It's the same Colt .45 he carried through the frozen forests of the Vosges Mountains, the same gun that saved his life at Anzio when 6 German soldiers tried to rush his position. Sherman, red-faced and trembling, has just made the mistake of calling Murphy a washed-up little soldier boy who should stick to dying in foxholes instead of ruining my picture. The words hang in the stifling air like cordite smoke, and Murphy's pale blue eyes have gone completely cold. Everyone on set knows that look. It's the same expression Murphy wore at Anzio when German soldiers tried to surrender too late. The look of a man who has moved beyond anger into something much more dangerous. The look of a predator calculating the most efficient way to eliminate a threat. Sherman takes another step backward, his voice cracking with terror. Audie, put the gun down. This is just a misunderstanding. I was just trying to get a better performance. But Murphy's hand doesn't move. His fingers remain wrapped around the grip of his sidearm, thumb resting on cookstand saw, dactress. The hammer, one click away from catastrophe. His stance is perfect, feet shoulder-width apart, weight, balanced, ready to draw and fire in less than 0.2 of a second. The crew stands frozen, knowing they're witnessing either the end of Audie Murphy's career or the end of So White, George Sherman's life. Possibly both. The script supervisor clutches her clipboard. The cinematographer has his hand frozen on his camera. Even the craft services table seems to hold its breath. Then a voice cuts through the tension like a blade through silk. Do it right. 3 words, spoken quietly from the shadows at the edge of the set. 3 words that will save Murphy's career, Sherman's life, and Hollywood's most dangerous secret. Before we continue with what happened next and how those 3 words changed everything, let me ask you something. Have you ever been so angry that you almost made a decision that would ruin your life? Hit that subscribe button to see how 3 words from a friend can pull you back from the edge. The voice belongs to James Cagney. He's been watching from behind the camera equipment, where he'd come to visit Murphy between takes on his own picture shooting 2 stages over. Cagney has seen combat veterans lose control before. He knows the signs, knows the triggers, and most importantly, he knows how to defuse a twin cullis situation when military training collides with civilian arrogance. Cagney had arrived 15 minutes earlier, hoping to invite Murphy for lunch at the studio commissary. Instead, he'd walked into a powder keg about to explode. He'd seen the warning signs immediately. Murphy's increasingly rigid posture, the way his voice had dropped to that dangerous whisper, the subtle shift in his stance from civilian actor to combat soldier. Murphy's head turns slightly toward Cagney's voice, but his gun hand doesn't waver. Do what right, he asks, his voice deadly calm. Cagney steps out of the shadows, moving with the careful precision of a man approaching a dangerous animal. His hands are visible, open, non-threatening. The scene, kid. Do the scene right, Show him how a real soldier would handle this situation. Sherman, still backing away, doesn't understand what Cagney is talking about. But Murphy does. And so does Bakinkue. Every crew member who served in the war. The confrontation started 20 minutes earlier, during what should have been a routine scene. Murphy's character, a Union Army sergeant, was supposed to confront a corrupt quartermaster who'd been selling supplies to Confederate forces. Simple dialogue, standard Western justice. The kind of scene Murphy had done 100 times in a dozen forgettable B-movies. But Sherman, a director known more for his temper than his talent, had been making adjustments all morning. Each take demanded more emotion, more rage, more authentic military bearing. Sherman had served as a Hillies supply clerk in Hawaii during the war, never heard a shot fired in anger, but considered himself an expert on Jawarab, military comportment. "You're not selling it, Murphy," Sherman shouted after the 5th take. "You look like a tired old man reading lines. Where's the fire? Where's the military precision I've read about in all those magazine articles?" Murphy, fighting the exhaustion that came from 3 sleepless nights of war nightmares triggered by a 4th of July fireworks display, tried again. And again. Each time, Sherman's criticism grew sharper, more personal. "For Christ's sake, you're supposed to be America's greatest soldier. Act like it. Show some backbone. I've seen teenage boys in school plays with more military bearing than you're showing me." The crew had started exchanging uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew Murphy's reputation, not just as a war hero, but as a man who didn't tolerate disrespect well. The smart money was on someone stepping in to calm things down before they went too far. Nobody moved. "You know what I think?" Sherman continued, his voice growing louder with each word. "I think all those stories about you are bullshit. I think you were just in the right place at the right time, and the Army needed a Beatty Riyadjad poster boy. I think you're nothing but a washed-up little soldier boy who should stick to dying in foxholes, instead of ruining my picture." That's when Murphy snapped. Not from the criticism, he'd heard worse from drill sergeants, but from Sherman's fundamental misunderstanding of what military bearing actually looked like, and from the casual dismissal of every man Murphy had lost in Europe. "You want to see military precision?" Murphy said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that made German prisoners wet themselves. "You want to see what a real soldier looks like when he's had enough?" And that's when Murphy drew his gun. Not the prop weapon from the scene. His personal Colt .45, the same. One he'd carried through 3 years of European combat. The one that had never failed him when his life depended on it. The draw was faster than human eyes could follow. One moment Murphy's hand was at his side, the next his weapon was pointed directly at Sherman's chest. The director's face went from red to white to green in the span of 2 heartbeats. Now Cagney stands 10 feet away, his own hands visible and empty, his voice carrying the authority of someone who understands exactly what's happening. "Kid, look at me, not him." Murphy's eyes shift to Cagney, and for the first time in 5 minutes, his expression flickers. Something human shows through the ice-cold killing machine that Sherman's words had awakened. "Jimmy?" Murphy's voice is different now, confused, as if he's just waking up from a nightmare. Cagney nods slowly. "That's right, it's Jimmy. And you're Audie Murphy, movie actor, not Sergeant Murphy, combat soldier. This isn't Anzio. This is Stage 9 at Universal Studios." The distinction matters. Murphy's wartime training had taken over completely, transforming a civilian disagreement into a battlefield confrontation. In his mind, Sherman wasn't just an arrogant director. He was a threat to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. "But he," Murphy starts to say, his voice still carrying that dangerous edge. "He's an idiot." Cagney interrupts gently. "But he's not the enemy. He's just a guy who doesn't know any better. And you're not going to let an idiot destroy everything you've worked for." Sherman, finally understanding the gravity of the situation, keeps his mouth shut. Every person on that soundstage realizes they're watching a masterclass in crisis management from one of Hollywood's smartest men. Cagney takes one careful step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Audie, what would your squad think? If they saw you now, what would Johnny Reese say? Or Lieutenant Haney? What would they think about you? Throwing away everything you've built because some civilian jackass doesn't understand what he's talking about. The names hit Murphy like physical blows. His squad. The boys who didn't make it home from the Colmar pocket. The ones who trusted him to lead them through hell and back. Johnny Reese, who used to make perfect bird calls until a German grenade took off his jaw. Lieutenant Haney, who kept fighting for 3 minutes with a bullet through his spine. Would they want him to throw away everything he'd built because some director couldn't tell the difference between acting and reality? Murphy's grip on the gun loosened slightly. That's it, kid, come back to us. Cagney's voice is patient, understanding. You've got choices here. You can let your anger make this decision, or you can make it yourself. Which one would make your boys proud? The soundstage is silent except for the hum of arc lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. 47. People watch as America's most decorated war hero fights the most important battle of his civilian life, the battle against his own trained instincts. Cagney continues talking, his voice never changing tone. I know you're tired, kid. I know the nightmares are bad right now. I can see it in your eyes. But this isn't the answer. This isn't how Sergeant Murphy handled problems, and it's not how Audie Murphy needs to handle them either. Murphy's breathing begins to slow. The combat breathing he'd learned to control his heart rate, to steady his aim, to survive when survival seemed impossible. Think about Terry and James, Cagney says quietly, referring to Murphy's 2 young sons. Think about what they'd say if they saw their daddy on the evening news. Think about what Pam would have to explain to them. That does it. Murphy's family. His children who worship their father without understanding the weight he carries. His wife who already worries every time he comes home from the studio tense and angry. Slowly, deliberately, Murphy holsters his weapon. The collective exhale from the crew sounds like wind through trees. Sherman, his face white as printer paper, starts to speak. Thank God, I thought. Shut up, Cagney says without taking his eyes off Murphy. George, you're done for the day. Go home. Think about whether you want to come back tomorrow. And if you do come back, think about whether you want to keep treating war veterans like they're performing monkeys. Sherman starts to protest, but something in Cagney's tone stops him cold. He gathers his things and leaves. Without another word, his assistant director trailing behind him like a kicked dog. Cagney walks over to Murphy, who's now sitting on a prop crate with his head in his hands. The crew begins to disperse quietly, understanding that what they've witnessed should never be discussed outside these walls. Jimmy, what almost happened there? Murphy asks quietly, his voice shaking slightly. Cagney sits beside him on another crate. You almost let the war win, kid. Almost let it take away everything you've earned since you came home. Murphy looks up, his eyes filled with something Cagney recognizes from his own mirror some mornings. How? Do you know? How did you know what to say? You never served. Cagney is quiet for a long moment. Because I've been where you are. Different war, different demons, but Murin, same battlefield. The one inside your head. You never went to combat. No, but I fought my own war. Against poverty, against the streets, against people who thought I was just. Another punk from the Lower East Side who'd never amount to anything. Cagney's voice grows distant. Rage is rage, Audie. Doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is what you do with it. Murphy nods slowly, beginning to understand. Those 3 words, Murphy says. Do it right. How did you know that would work? Cagney smiles grimly. Because I know you, kid. You're not a killer by choice. You're a protector. When I reminded you to do it right, I was reminding you who you really are. Not the weapon the army trained, but the man who chose to use that training to save lives. They sit in silence for several minutes, the sound of hammers and saws from other sound stages, providing a fifth-lie rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. The thing about being a symbol, Cagney finally says, is that people forget you're human. They expect you to be perfect all the time. But perfection ain't human, kid. It's what gets you in trouble. How do you handle it? The expectations? Cagney thinks carefully. You remember that your real strength isn't in how hard you can hit. It's in knowing when not to swing. That's what separates the tough guys from the smart guys. Over the next hour, Cagney and Murphy sit on that soundstage talking about anger, about control, about the pacey difference between civilian problems and military solutions. Cagney shares stories of his own moments when rage nearly destroyed his career. The time he almost punched Louis B. Mayer, the night he was ready to walk away from Hollywood entirely because the studios treated him like a trained SEAL. Murphy talks about the nightmares that make him dangerous when he's startled awake, about the way his hands automatically reach for weapons that aren't there, about the exhaustion that comes from constantly translating civilian problems through a military mindset. Sherman doesn't understand, Murphy says. None of them do. They think military bearing is about standing straight and barking orders. They don't understand that real military discipline is about controlling yourself, when every instinct tells you to eliminate the threat. That's why they need you, Cagney replies. Not to perform military discipline, but to show them what it really looks like. When Sherman returns the next day, he's a different man. No more shouting. No more personal attacks. No. More assumptions about what real soldiers should look like. Word has spread through the studio about what happened, though the details remain deliberately vague. All anyone knows for certain is that Audie Murphy nearly ended his career over a director's stupidity, and James Cagney talked him down. Sherman approaches Murphy tentatively, his arrogance replaced by something that might be respect. Audie, about yesterday. Murphy cuts him off with a raised hand. George, let's just make the movie. Do it right. The phrase has become Murphy's new mantra, and Sherman understands that it's both an olive branch and a warning. The movie gets finished without further incident. Sherman even apologizes properly, though Murphy barely acknowledges it. The real conversation continues to happen between Murphy and Cagney, two professionals, who understand that sometimes the most dangerous battle is the one you fight against yourself. 6 months later, Murphy receives a package with no return address. Inside is a framed photograph, the crew of Stage 9, taken the day after the incident. Everyone is smiling, relaxed, working together like a family. At the bottom, someone has written, "The day Jimmy saved us all." But Cagney didn't just save Sherman's life or Murphy's career, he saved something more important: Murphy's faith in his ability to control the weapons the war had built into his nervous system. For the rest of his life, Murphy carries Cagney's 3 words with him: do it right. Not do it fast, not do it hard, not do it like a soldier. Do it right. Like a man who chooses his actions instead of letting his training choose for him. The incident becomes Hollywood legend, though the details are kept deliberately vague. Everyone understands, and Shusfurna, that some stories are too dangerous to tell completely. But the lesson spreads through the industry: treat veterans with respect, not because they're heroes, but because heroes carry weapons you can't see. Murphy never draws a gun on a set again. Never loses control like that again. But he also never forgets how close he came to destroying everything because someone pushed the wrong button at the wrong time. Cagney's 3 words become Murphy's philosophy for navigating civilian life: do it right. Right for the scene. Right for the story, right for the man he chose to become after the war ended. Because sometimes the difference between heroism and tragedy is 3 words, spoken by a friend who understands that everyone, even legends, needs someone to pull them back from the edge. The real enemy isn't the guy with the gun. It's the moment when you forget you have a choice about whether to Miko Lee whack from Mentrave. The track from Miko whack from in. Hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments. Have you ever had someone talk you down from making a terrible decision? And unfortunately, they don't make men like James Cagney and Audie Murphy anymore.